Good afternoon, boys and girls. Welcome to today's lesson. We've got a couple exciting things lined up for us today. We're going to start off with some checkmates, just to get those brains warmed up. And we're going to move from there onto some attacking chess. I think over the last few weeks, we've discussed end games in quite some detail. And then last week and the week before, we touched on a little bit of opening play. We touched on some ideas that you might want to try if you were playing white. And then we also touched on some ideas that you might want to investigate if you're playing with the black pieces. So we're going to go a little bit further, a little bit deeper into that situation today. And we're going to look at some attacking ideas that you can try. Again, now with the white pieces this side, we'll look at both E4 and D4 openings. So some exciting things lined up for us today. Let's get right into it. So as you guys can see, I've shared the screen. We got the lead chess in front of us here, and we've got a nice little position with white to play. I'm going to give you guys 30 seconds just to think quickly and see if you can find the mate for white. So it's white to play, checkmate in one move. Let's see if we can figure out how to do that. Guys, remember, as always, whenever you're trying to checkmate the king, the enemy king, make sure that you see that where that king might potentially be able to run. In this case, it seems like the king only has this b8 square available. So if you attack him, wherever you attack him, however you choose to attack him, currently he only has this b8 square available to him. Of course, if you were to move something like queen d5, then you might open up this square as well for them too. So if you want to make sure that it's mate, you've got to make sure that you're attacking the king and that you're covering all the squares that the king might try and evacuate to. All right, so I think that's enough time. I think we've already had a little bit of a look, and I've given you guys some ideas. I kind of hinted at the fact that we want to start with the queen. We've got this little bishop here that we're going to use as a nice support structure. And the queen is going to roll on to this b7 square. He's covering these available squares or these areas that the king might choose to run to, and it's check at the same time. The king is in check. He cannot escape the check. He has been mated. This is good news for us. Very happy with that. Again, just he can't touch the queen because the bishop is defending the queen. Nice and easy, nice one to start with, something that you guys are probably already familiar with. Let's move on. Okay, again, very much the same. It has to be check. In order for it to be checkmate, it has to be a check. And we have to see what available squares the king might have to run to. So this one, he's got quite a few more. It's obviously going to be a bit of a challenge. Again, let's take 30 seconds. Let's figure out if we can maybe find a way to checkmate. Here's your hint. Use the queen and the bishop together to deliver a checkmate. So I hope you guys are all looking at the queen. Of course, the queen is the one who's going to deliver the mate. And you've got to be looking at all possible checks, all possible takes. That's something that I want you guys doing in just about every chess position. It's a good habit to get yourselves into. And that will help you to make sure that you don't miss obvious threats and also some opportunities that might present themselves during the course of the game. So let's have a quick look at all the available checks on the board. So we've got one here, queen b8, queen b6. We've got a little queen a5 over here. And then we've got the solution, which is the correct move. Let's address these other ones first. You can almost tell that these are not correct because it doesn't have any impact on the king moving to these surrounding squares. So it seems like the king can get out of danger fairly easily. So we're not going to spend too much time discussing those. Queen b8. Okay, now a little bit more interesting. We're covering these squares. We are also covering that square. Unfortunately, it looks like the king is still going to be able to escape along the diagonal to the e7 square, and he kind of gets away. It's a bit of a pity. It's a nice try, but it just doesn't work. And this is the way you guys need to be looking at all of your moves. This is the approach you need to be taking. You need to be saying to yourself, okay, what do I need to do? What do I want to do? Okay, how am I going to do that? That's cool. So the correct move, queen takes d7. I did give you guys a hint of using the two pieces to work together. The coordination of the two pieces here works out beautifully. The bishop defends the queen, and again we've popped the queen right in front of the king, which is doing the job for us perfectly. The queen covers all of these squares, so the king is pretty much stuck, and that's a good one to remember. We've spoken about this before. Put the queen slap bang in front of the king. There is no escape for the king. Let's move on. All right, so we mixed it up a bit here. I decided to put, we can give the black pieces a go. And this one I decided to put a little bit of a trickster in there. I think the obvious move, we just talked about it now, putting the queen slap bang in front of the king. The knight also defends that square. So it's like, looks very, very tempting. Very, very tempting. You're like, okay, can't I just mate him here? I mean, that seems good, hey? I'll give you guys, let's go 30 seconds again, see if you guys can find the mate. Again, make sure you investigate all possible checks. Have a look. Where can the king escape to? What available squares does the king currently have? Have a look, have a look, have a look. Let's see what we can find out here. Oh, it actually looks like there might be two mates here. Very, very nice. All right, let's have a look. So like I said, all possible checks must be investigated. I already kind of told you this one's off the cards. The pawn defends that square. Ouch. That's going to be the end of the queen and the end of our winning chances. All in one foul swoop. That's no good. So queen check here. Oh, it's close. It's close. It does seem like the king will just have this g3 square available. Okay. What's gone wrong here? Fine. What about this one? Doesn't look as convincing. I'm moving the queen away. I'm opening up this square, and this square is also available. Not the most convincing of moves. We then make this realization that there's no way that I can move the queen that delivers mate. Then we start looking at alternatives. And then we look to our knight over here, and hey, the knight can deliver a check here, and the knight can deliver a check here. These are both fairly good tries. We can have a look and see if they work. And then you realize, wait a minute, it's check, and the king cannot move anywhere. And that will be the game. That's going to be a tough one. For white, that's mate. Again, like I said, knight f5, basically the exact same thing. It's check. You can't escape the check. That is mate. Very nice. Interesting fact here. If it were white to play, the dreaded stalemate would come in because there are no squares that the white king can move to. He can't. There's no available moves for the white king. This position is stalemate. So that would be a draw, and that would be exceptionally bad news for the person playing black, because of course they want to win the game here, and they were just probably not too far away from doing that. You can see the queen and the knight work together quite nicely, and you should be able to find a mate somewhere. Let's move on. Okay, a little bit of a simpler position in the fact that there's not as many checks available, but I think it might be a slightly harder problem. It's black to play, and it's mate in 1. Give you guys 30 seconds again. Let's see who can come up with it. Again, all possible checks. Where can that king run? How is he going to escape our attack? Can he escape? Let's see. So it looks like we can only see 1 check here. I don't know about you guys. Oh, maybe there's definitely a second check. Okay, so realistically, there's only 2 available checks. One of them works, one of them doesn't work out so well. We'll investigate this shortly. Have you guys got it? I hope so. Let's have a look. So if the rook takes the b1 rook, so rook takes rook, is it going to be mate? Looks hopeful, but it seems like the king is going to be able to take on this a2 square, and that's going to backfire a little bit. We're going to take this rook, king a2, and there's no mate here. The king has sort of made his way out. He's sort of survived. That's not what we want to see. Like I said, that's the main check. That's the first check that sort of stands out. You're really hoping that it'll work, but it doesn't. So then we have to look to the pawn. A little bit of an uncommon one, and I thought I'd throw this in here just to try and keep you guys on your toes. So now the pawn is going to take the rook. What's going to happen? Hey, the pawn went to the other side, which means the pawn promotes. This is good news for us. The pawn promotes into a queen. The queen attacks the king and covers this square. And additional good news is that the rook defends the queen. Oh my goodness, that's not a queen. It defends the queen, and that is mate. Very, very nice. Yeah, so just be careful, guys. As you see, sometimes you click something a little bit quickly. It won't be the first time it's happened in, let's say, a game. So just be careful. I hope you guys are playing your online games. Just make sure that you do just take an extra second to make your move deliberately, and make sure you put your pieces on the right squares. It can be quite frustrating when you're meant to click somewhere and you drop your piece just short, and then you end up just losing your queen for free. It's going to happen at some stage, but obviously we don't want it to happen. We'd prefer if it never happens. So just be careful when you're making your move and playing online. All right, so those are the checkmates. I hope you guys solved those ones. A little bit tricky. Always good to do some tactics. Like I've told you guys before, there's tactics on Lead Chess, and there's puzzles there as well. It's always a good idea just to keep that brain sharp. Do your tactics, do your puzzles. Chess.com also has quite a nice puzzles feature that you guys are more than welcome to investigate. Let's move on to our attacking chess, and our first order of attacking chess. That is the fried liver attack. Now, the fried liver, very, very strange name. I think you've heard me talk about it before over the course of our chess lessons. It's an interesting one to know, both from the attacking and defending side, because you just want to make sure that, first of all, if you're defending, that you don't fall for these sort of tricks, and if you're attacking, it's a nice move that you can play just to put your opponent under a little bit of pressure from the get-go. So a nice one just to touch on and just educate you guys a little bit on the art of attacking chess. So let's get into it. E4, E5, your standard sort of opening stuff. Like as promised, we discuss E4 attacking and D4 attacking. I think when I mentioned to you guys previously, E4 and D4, your two sort of main opening moves here for white, and very good moves, both of them. So E4, E5, knight F3, knight C6. So the knight knight attacks E5, then the black knight gets developed and defends. Again, guys, opening principles are not to be forgotten. Develop your pieces, castle your king. Pawns in the center. Pawns in the center first, then you develop, then you castle. Those three, as long as you're remembering them and applying them to each of your games, you are going to get yourself into good positions. You are going to get yourself a good start. Bishop c4. Okay, this is the way the fried liver goes. So I would recommend for black here, probably bishop c5. I think it's the best continuation. And then it stops white from going knight g5 because the queen protects that square. So obviously if you were to play knight g5, black would happily help himself to that knight. And that would just be a dropping of a piece, and that we do not want to see. So instead, knight f6 is the main move here. And this allows us to go knight g5 as it blocks the line of the queen, or the diagonal of the queen. And this is the fried liver. So it puts a lot of pressure on f7. And of course, white's plan is to just go knight takes f7, which will then fork the queen and the rook. Fork being a double attack, two attacks at the same time. There will be no way to save both of those pieces. So, you know, you could move the queen. Obviously, you want to save the queen. It's more valuable, and then you would lose the rook. So, for instance, if black just sort of didn't do anything about this move and sort of continued with his plan, he's like, okay, I'll develop the bishop. Seems like a good idea. Not a good idea. Knight takes f7 as promised. Double attack. Two attacks at the same time. So the queen should probably move. Of course, if you move the rook, I'm going to take the queen. It's just that simple. So you have to sort of move the queen. I'm going to take the rook. And okay, I mean, white just picked up 6 points for free. That's a pawn and a rook. That's 6 points. And in some cases, this knight can get trapped on this square. Like maybe the queen can go queen f8, and then queen takes h8. But it seems like the knight can still escape currently because the bishop defends that square. Okay, so this is a bit of a horror story for the black pieces here as far as a good opening start goes. So what's important to remember, if you're black, is probably just to develop the bishop first to avoid this knight g5. And of course, if you're white, you'd love to see knight g5, and you're very happy to see knight f7. Now, this fried liver doesn't mean you win the game. Absolutely not. It just gives you an attacking start. It just causes your opponent a little bit of trouble. And there is a solution to this knight f7 problem. And that comes with the pawn to d5, which blocks this diagonal from reaching the square. Okay? So now d5 is played, and we've stopped the double attack on this square. Of course, if knight just takes now, it's quite easy for the king to just take. That's not going to be very good for white. So pawn takes d5. That's fine. And then there's a couple moves that black can play here. I don't want to go into too much fried liver detail. It can get quite complicated. Knight takes d5 is playable, but it's maybe a little questionable. Maybe the best move that you can just play with black is knight a5. And you just go after this bishop. But I think you guys will agree with me, this all starts to get a little bit complicated, and a lot of these complications can just be avoided if black just simply remembers to play bishop c5 in the beginning. For those who like the knight f6 move here, this knight g5, I would recommend you guys give it a try, test it out, maybe catch a few people with a few tricks, and maybe get yourself a nice few, let's call them easy wins with this. You're just suddenly picking up some big material, and that's definitely going to help you on your quest for victory. All right, so guys, give the fried liver a go. And for those of you looking at this position from the black's side and thinking, oof, I must make sure I don't fall for that. Yes, absolutely. Just remember rather bishop c5, which avoids the early knight g5 because the queen's occupying that square still. Fantastic. So that covers the fried liver. And of course, we can always go into more detail at a later stage. I think it's better you guys learn bit by bit. You don't want to just, otherwise it'll just get a little bit too tricky. Let's move on. So d4 kingside attack. So I think the last time we discussed the d4 opening, I recommended the London to you guys. And this makes up the London opening with d4 and bishop f4. We can do something similar. What I wanted to really discuss is the attacks on the h7 square once the king is castled. So let's go with something like d5. We can go with bishop f4, knight h6. Again, guys, pawns in the center, develop your pieces. And castle your king. Let's play some, probably not a good move for black, but a move that you guys will see a lot of people will maybe try against you. They believe that the check is good. Remember, guys, a check on its own means nothing at all. It's very easy for you to just stop this check, and a check doesn't really change anything. So a check on its own, not useful. So c3, in fact, is just good for white because white just got this move for free. Again, I focus on my development. I want to get my pieces into the game as quickly as possible. Black castles, nothing wrong here. White does the same, also pretty good. Let's develop for black. And let's go knight bd2. So now white has completed his development. I'm always talking to you guys about this. Let's make sure that we develop our pieces first before we start attacking, before we start launching big attacks onto the king side and things like that. So it's always good practice to develop your pieces and castle your king, and then you can start to get creative and adventurous and try different ways to attack your opponent and things like that. Okay, make sure development is complete first. So knight c6 would be good. Maybe c5 also, nothing wrong with that move. For interest's sake here, let's go with knight h5, which is also an interesting idea. I mean, they're putting pressure on this h4. I mean, f4, my apologies, the f4 bishop. And yeah, we're going to be aware of this. So what I wanted to point out is how the knight, the bishop, and the queen can work together very nicely on this h7 square. And I think a lot of you, I've seen a couple of you look at like stuff like bishop b1 in these cases, bishop b1. And the idea is to go queen c2 and then launch an attack on the h7 square. Remember, the h7 or h2, depending on whether you're playing white or black, is sort of the vulnerable square for that castled king. And it's very important that they keep that under wraps. So for instance, if black played knight c6, queen c2 here, you're threatening mate. It's very, very scary. So, and if they misplay this, you know, they sort of forget about it, play a normal move, whatever the case might be, boom, you get mated on the h7 square. So quite a scary one. You can see the queen, or the bishop rather, and the queen working together on this diagonal. That's called a battery in chess. But an interesting way to sort of target that square. We're going to look at an alternative now. But that's something that's quite cool, something that you can give a go, maybe catch somebody out with that. So in this one, after knight h5, I wanted to now talk about knight g5. Remember, I mentioned the combination of these three pieces working together on this h7 square. So now if they were smart, they'd realize, hey, you know, the bishop and the knight are targeting h7. The other thing that's a problem for black is now that the queen is targeting that knight on h5. So there's a couple things that could happen here. I'll walk you through some of the options. Maybe h6 would be an option for black to stop, obviously, white from taking here. I think queen takes h5 would be fairly devastating. The major issue that black has is when they take, we're going queen h7 mate. And again, you see our pieces are all sort of working towards that h7 square. We're going after that square. We want to checkmate the king. Here's how it might play out. Just a note, the bishop defends the queen. So of course, there's no king takes. Again, guys, if you're going to move the piece near the king, make sure or ensure that that piece is protected. The king can still take your pieces. Okay? Another interesting one that I was just calculating now, although I think it's very much going to be f6 might also be playable, but I feel, oof, maybe you can just go straight away. Bishop takes h7 with queen h5. I think that's going to be death for the black pieces, unfortunately. King here, and then queen h5. Now pawn takes. Guys, I'm going to give you 30 seconds here. There looks like there's a very sneaky little mate in two. that white can deliver. Again, so you're going to make one move. Black's going to move the king to safety, or temporary safety, and then we'll deliver the checkmate straight after that. Let's see if you guys can find it. Mate into. Clue with the light squared bishop. First move. Okay, so the bishop's going to move. It's going to be check. The king will then move, and then we deliver the mate. Has everyone got it? I guess we're going to see now. All right, so the correct move is bishop g6. That opens up the line between the queen and the king. And that would be an example of a discovered check. We discover the check onto the king. The king has to move to g8, and then boom, we deliver the checkmate. Again, is it checkmate? Can't you run here? Ah, that's why we put this bishop here, because this bishop covers that square. An interesting idea. So if you had the idea of maybe moving the bishop back here, unfortunately, it doesn't work out as well, because now the king, oopsie daisy, the king has the ability to run to that f7 square. Maybe you could still end up mating. Yes, it looks like it. Bishop g6, maybe king e7, queen g7. Now it looks like they have to block, and you end up mating them anyway. But of course, the shorter mate is the better one. Rather just go simply to bishop g6, and then you just mate them on h7. All right, guys. Thank you very much for paying attention and focusing during today's lesson. Please try and play at least, I'm hoping for one game a day, if you guys have got time, depending on how your schedule goes. It seems like we've all got a little bit more time at the moment, so try and keep that chess brain ticking over, keep the practicing going, and I hope you guys are doing that chess program. Very excited about that too. All right, guys, thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of your week. Take care. Bye-bye.